Arcane is a story that almost devilishly structures itself in a way that forces the characters within it to accept a very individualized call to action. This is a politically volatile setting, full of quick power shifts, conflict, oppression, progression, and death, and so whether they do this reluctantly or willingly, these characters often find themselves in positions where they need to take on a ton of responsibility extremely swiftly. The younger generation are hoisted into roles of great influence in one way or another, whether they're ready for it or not, and regardless of their individual ages, there is a constant feeling of a lot of these characters having to grow up far too quickly, really hammered home through the time skip. And there is no better example of this idea than EKKO, whose circumstances more or less leave him with no perceived choice but to take up the mantle as the leader of the Firelights and to fight an uphill battle for peace, prosperity, happiness, and salvation for his people. The Firelights are introduced into the story's second act with a bang, and immediately their cause is front-loaded to the audience. They consistently try to frustrate and harass Silco's operations, but they're explicitly stated to oppose the Enforcers and higher society in Piltover as a whole as well. It's an awesome way of deepening and broadening the conflict while offering a third perspective through this anarchist group that has no interest in going along with either of the two conflicting powers. The motive here alone, along with the aura formed around the mysterious leader of the group, would strongly hint at their identity, but with the reveal, everything clicks into place and everything makes sense. Who has been oppressed by Enforcers and the like their entire life, and would therefore have every reason to hate them? Who has also experienced immense personal loss at the hands of Silco, despises the way his rise has resulted in such neglect throughout the Undercity, and as a result would no doubt have huge issues with the voice of the downtrodden coming from the same lips that ordered the murders of those he loved. EKKO has experienced so much in his short life, enough to know that what he wants, peace and freedom, neither of which should be such a distant dream, is impossible under the current order. And so he forms a new one, with eyes wide open and a clearer understanding of how to move forward than the vast majority due to his experience, conviction, and intelligence.
It's not enough to give people what they need to survive. You have to give them what they need to live.
It's not enough to simply exist or survive or tread water day by day. Vander made the best of a torrid situation, and in the grand scheme of things, you can completely see the logic and benefits of this unsavory truce that he made with Grayson to maintain the status quo. But that status quo was unsustainable because of how much it maintained an existence of underlying yet palpable anxiety and subjugation for his people, who were never able to properly see the light. As voiced explicitly by people like Vi and Savika, this truce was never going to be enough long-term, and these people would eventually reach out for more. And this is it. While the methods here are anarchical and nearly polar opposite to Vander's, EKKO and the Firelights very much carry on the sentiment and spirit of the late, great man's legacy through their cause. Although I do need to clarify one thing. When people think of anarchy, the mind can sometimes go straight to absolute directionless chaos. But anarchy need not be so nonsensical, and that obviously isn't the case here. EKKO is an anarchist because he leads an anarchist group and pursues anarchist ideals. In this corrupt setting, he and the Firelights gun for total freedom of the individual, a rejection of the classist system that's been plaguing the setting for so long. He views both Silco and Piltover as rotten to the core, governmental mainstays that will not offer any benefit to him or his loved ones, and so he rejects both sides to carve out a future for his people. The resultant disorder as he and his faction continue to bring about those ideals and try to grasp power is just a manifestation of his yearning to see the light, after being stuck in the dark his whole life.
I declare war on anybody standing in the way of what I dream for.
Anarchy is not defined by destruction. It is simply defined as the pursuing of a society freely constituted without authorities or a governing body. The Firelights reject the rule of the governing bodies in power and seek their own freedom, and they reject the currently established hierarchies. It has nothing to do with what some may view as the destructive side of anarchy, and it is very much done with an eye for an improved world and society. EKKO is definitely an anarchist, but even if his plans up until now have been focused much more on buffering the progress of his enemies rather than gaining momentum, he is one with a clear focus on what needs to be done, and he has made a home here that is portrayed visually and tonally as the most prosperous location in the story. Yet, on the way to these results, he has had to grow up far too quickly, and he has shouldered far too much. Upon meeting this new older EKKO during my watch, I initially wondered if his internal self would be unrecognizable, cold, and hardened. It's a very likely and believable outcome for people in these sorts of situations, and initially he seemed to be going along that direction, with what seemed to be a detachment in his demeanor in his interactions with Vi. However, as it turns out, my initial impressions couldn't have been more wrong.
I thought you were dead. Now you show up with a Pilty and give her a tour of the lanes?
You were following us. Why didn't you say something?
I didn't know if I could trust you.
So you just come out swinging?
Gee, I wonder who I learned that from.
It's such great subtextual storytelling through body language, facial expressions, and voice acting, and through this we can see exactly what EKKO has gone through. To take up this mantle and be the leader that was needed, he no doubt had to make a ton of difficult decisions. He must have experienced all sorts of things that someone so young should never have experienced, and he had to do all of this whilst in constant conflict with his childhood friend, who had become unrecognizable from the girl he grew close to. That is so much to put on anyone, let alone someone who had to simultaneously grieve such horrible losses, grow up, and mature whilst experiencing these things with very little margin for error. It's a wonder that he has come this far at all and banded this group together so effectively while giving them a place to genuinely call home. All in all, EKKO's done a phenomenal job, but the personal cost is clear. He's had to compartmentalize and shut himself off from tough decisions he makes as a leader. He's learned that caring for others will likely only ever lead to pain due to them dying, going missing, or completely turning against him. It's not that he doesn't feel, it's that he has taught himself not to express it despite wanting to in order to protect himself and stay strong as the leader that he needs to be. And yet, he still harbors that hope and care. While talking with Vi, the facade quickly melts away and we can see a desperate hope in his eyes as he probes, tries to see if this is the older sister figure he's missed so much. Who knows how long it's been since he's been able to be vulnerable with or confide in anyone? How long has it been since he's been able to cry in someone's arms and be anything less than a symbol? We don't know for sure, but personally it's clear as day to me that his situation never really allowed for that. And so in Vi, he sees an opportunity to let the little boy out, just a little bit. He wants to reach out, but doesn't know if this Vi is the same Vi he could trust. And yet, against everything he's learned, he desperately hopes that he can let his guard down here. And the beautiful thing is, he can. This is the same Vi, broken and rageful and unrelenting, but very much the same person at heart, just as loving as she's always been, while also being someone who can relate to an extent to the trials and sacrifices that leadership requires. EKKO has been surrounded by adoration and people who love him, but at the same time, he's been plagued by loneliness that only a leader can relate to. And it's like Vi intuitively understands what he's gone through as only family can, as she takes him in this embrace and allows him to be a kid, to be little man, just for a moment.
I remember when you wouldn't stand up to me. I missed you, little man.
How long have you had those off?
How long have you been whining?
It's such beautiful subtext that puts us in EKKO's mindset, and we see this trend of him not wanting to be hurt and having to take up the cold leader's mantle resurface as he talks about Jinx to Vi. He describes her as a lost cause, says that there is absolutely nothing of the girl they once knew left in there. And yet we are shown explicitly that he isn't saying what he truly thinks here. Regardless of whether he's telling this to Vi to try and ease the pain of the situation for her, or saying this to try to convince himself and commit to action against Jinx, or both. What is clear is that he isn't genuinely convinced of what he's saying at all. Why would someone who genuinely believes that powder isn't in there and who holds no hope for that hesitate when given the opportunity to take out such a vital enemy the moment he looks her in the eyes? Why would he flash back to childhood memories of Powder when fighting her if Powder is dead and gone and not present in Jinx? He still, to an extent, sees Jinx as Powder, whether he wants to admit it or not, and it's all of these little human nuances that reveal the vulnerabilities of EKKO that make him such a fantastic character to invest in, and with quite limited screen time as well. He's fashioned himself into a supremely impressive figure, an influential spearhead, and a fantastic leader who has taught his people to believe in a bright future in a world that seems to lend no promise for that. He's done better than the vast majority would in his position. But deep down, there are still remnants of the kid who's had to grow up too fast buried within him that resurface around loved ones or perk up when talking about gadgets and technology with Heimerdinger. And despite his achievements, he has plenty of growing up to do and plenty of things to learn even still. Yet, I really hope he never completely loses that side of himself. I don't know what the future of the story has in store for EKKO, but he has a genuine home, a cause to fight for, a new and bountiful spring of knowledge and perspective in Heimerdinger, and a couple of people around him now that can help him shoulder the burdens he carries. He's already an amazing character, and he's poised to make even greater strides once the story continues. Many thanks for watching.